give a warm welcome to the hosts of the Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. 40 years ago, a terrible crime was committed in the annals of cinematic history, and in the process, in the opening scene, they ripped off a much better movie from 10 years before in the annals of cinematic history for a very cool opening monologue that I'm imitating very well. This is Bride of Alternate Ending, the horror sideshow of the Alternate Ending podcast network. I am your co-ghost, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is the other co-ghost, Tim Brayton. How are you doing today?
I am scared out of my wits to hear about what happened on that fateful day in the Nevada desert. That was not at all the Texas desert. Very different place. Mm-hmm. How dare you? How dare you even suggest anything untoward?
No, what I am suggesting is that the opening monologue of our topic today, The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, is ripped directly from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with basically no edits.
I'm saying, how dare you? I'm saying this is a work of great cinematic inspiration, and
of course.
I don't think you should shortchange that two geniuses might have arrived at the same point simultaneously.
Simultaneously, 10 years apart.
10 years apart, yes.
Or maybe given the troubled production history.
How do we even know that Wes Craven saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I think you're just assuming that.
I'm pretty sure he saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Anyway, yes, we are here to talk about The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 from 1984 or 1985, depending on who you ask. Its release was very complicated, as was its production history, which we will get into. But the reason we are talking about this movie is because we nominated 5 different movies for our poll this month that are all belated sequels in honor of Gladiator II, which is coming out very long after the original Gladiator. We thought we'd kind of hit up sequels that came out 7 years or later after the original movie. This one was one of these slimmer hiatuses that we had, but the people really wanted to hear us talk about Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, and we shall.
I would like to suggest, I don't think they wanted to hear us talk about it, and they wanted to force us to watch it, but we'll get there.
Yes, but in the meantime, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping in terms of what the fuck is going on with the podcast. I do want to let you know we're rolling out some very exciting, very big changes to the podcast. We are resurrecting a version of Alternate Ending that is not just Tim and I talking about horror, which has been basically the entirety of this year on the air.
Pretty much. We do. And I've said this in multiple places at this point. These plans were already in place prior to our tragic loss that happened in the fall of 2024. But that loss kind of was a spur to make sure that we made it happen because I know Rob wanted it to happen. And so we are bringing back other podcasts than this, as Brennan just said. But that does mean we need to make room for those other podcasts. Which means that starting this month with this very episode, Bride of Alternate Ending will be going down to once a month rather than every other week.
Yes, and you may notice we're not out on a spooky Friday, but instead a creepy Tuesday. That's also part of this larger schedule change rollout that we're doing. But yes, so we are going to be doing one a month, but we're actually going to be, for the most part, kind of expanding our coverage of certain topics, because what we used to do was we'd have a theme for the month and we'd have 2 episodes covering movies that fit that theme. But we're actually going to be changing to kind of a quarterly schedule. So we will be covering whatever topic we're doing, whether it's haunted houses or slashers or whatever the fuck. It's going to take place over the course of 3 months, so you're getting 3 episodes on 3 movies within that topic. So I'm excited to be able to kind of dig deeper into whatever.
Dig a little more, yeah, because it was always a little difficult for me to decide which of the 5 candidates we wanted after the one that won the poll, and that won't happen as much anymore. That part of the rollout isn't going to be quite immediate. We are going to, as with all the other changes to the site, be rolling things out kind of bit by bit over the winter and spring, but that is certainly something we hope to have kind of locked in place fairly new into the new year.
Yeah, and we have the infrastructure to make a Bride of alternate ending. We have the practice.
We sure do. If
we
there's
have
one
the technology.
thing we know we can do. If there's one thing we know we can do, it's Bride.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just to delay talking about this movie for a little longer, I have some Bride of AE follow-ups. I've done a bit of a victory lap in October with certain things we've covered in the past. First of all, we did Stephen King movies last month for Halloween season. And after we recorded our episode on Silver Bullet, I finally sat down to read Stephen King's Danse Macabre, his kind of treatise on the horror genre. This is a book that I know you have referenced. You referenced in your Jason X review, actually.
Good place for it.
Yeah, no, it is. It was talking about the memorable segment where Stephen King compares the modern, like well-made bad movie to a dead rat encased in a lucite block.
Yes.
But I was aware that this was something I was going to encounter in this book. But when I read the passage, I think it has been lost to time that he's talking about William Friedkin's Cruising when he uses that description, and that is an outlandishly shocking thing for me to discover.
I had honestly forgotten that that's the film he was discussing, so thank you for calling my attention to that.
Yeah. I found that to be outrageous. I think the final third of Cruising is very boring, but I think it is a very interesting movie that I'm not shocked that I don't agree with Stephen King on his tastes, but it was a weird thing to encounter.
That is true. And also, Danse Macabre came out when Cruising had not yet even hinted at going through a cultural reappraisal, which it has now largely gone through, I think. So that's part of it as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's an interesting document. But anyway, that's something I wanted to follow up on just briefly.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad you read it. That is a book that I think is honestly one of his very best written texts.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And like all Stephen King books, it is too long, but it was a really fun read. Yeah. But anyway, so just one other thing. The people who are part of the Discord have seen this. But I have my boyfriend Ben and I went to a performance of Green Day's American Idiot at Mark Taper Forum. And one of the leads was Milo Manheim, who is the lead of the Zombies Disney musical trilogy. We got a picture with him. I got to hug Zed the zombie from Zombies, and I just wanted everyone to know that happened.
I think that's excellent. Also, you've reminded me, Zombies 4 is coming out in 2025, I believe, which is going to cause an interruption to the podcast schedule we just talked about, because clearly, whenever that hits, we're talking about it.
Yeah,
if what's going on.
Yeah, if we learn of the release date far enough ahead of time, we will just tailor a quarter to allow us to talk about whatever that is.
Amen.
I mean, I don't think we've done Vampires Month, and they're introducing vampires in Zombies 4, so that might be perfect.
All right, there you go. I love it.
Anyway, yes, so that's kind of what's going on over here. But anyway, I don't think we have any excuse to not talk about The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 anymore.
I mean, I can tell you about what I did with Stephen King after we recorded our Stephen King episodes.
Oh, what did you do?
I don't think I had finished it yet when we did Silver Bullet, but I watched the 1997 three-part television The Shining.
Oh. That's great for you.
I've also seen now both of the Salem's Lots that aren't the Tobe Hooper version. I saw the Rob Lowe starring version from 2004, and then I watched the new one.
The Gary Dauberman joint.
Gary Dauberman is Salem's Lot. Yeah, terrible movie.
Yeah, that sounds right. And yet, Max didn't bury that one.
Sure did not.
They tried their hardest.
Yeah, they clearly seem to have held it in higher regard than the new film by Oscar-winning director Clint Eastwood, though. So
Jesus Christ, I've been writing about that. I've been following this news story as a reporter, and it is outrageous. It is infuriating, and I'm not even like that. I haven't watched a Clint Eastwood movie in many years, a new Clint Eastwood movie. But first of all, Juror Number 2 is the one where I'm like, I actually might watch that. That seems interesting. And it's just it is incomprehensible the way that they are. I mean, it's very comprehensible, but it's just not right the way that they are treating that movie.
The latest film by a 93-year-old damn man who could die tomorrow.
Yeah. Anyway, terrible. Anyway, so what was the best experience of those miniseries and movies that you watched?
Oh, for sure, the Rob Lowe Salem's Lot. It was at times almost good.
Oh, that's it. When that's the bright spot in your watch list, that is a dark moment. I'm happy you made it through.
The 1997 Shining so badly underperformed even my very gloomy predictions.
I have never dared, and I will probably continue to not, based on this reaction. But anyway, the time has come, the Walrus said, to talk about The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. I think maybe I'll try to tackle the plot synopsis as the resident Wes Craven.
I think you have seen it multiple times, and you almost sort of liked it, I think. Based on your Letterboxd score.
This exists in the same space as Friday the 13th Part 5 in my brain, which is like...
I agree.
No, where it's just... It's a movie that I have a certain amount of affection for. Actually, I like Friday the 13th 5 way more than this movie, but like I feel like the vibes are similar to me, in which they're just like very cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in a way that I a little bit respond to, but they're just emphatically not good movies. But no, so The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, it had a tortured history. So my man Wes Craven, the poor guy, I don't in my estimation, he didn't really come to become the thing that he was until Nightmare on Elm Street, which was in 1984. I think there's a lot of great stuff in his earlier movies, and there's a lot of very bad stuff in his earlier movies. And The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 was produced before Elm Street, and I think it shows.
Yes.
But anyway, so he had just taken a bath on his first attempt to, as a credited director, not make a horror movie, which was the DC Comics adaptation Swamp Thing. He was in dire straits. He needed work. And why not make a sequel to one of your more profitable movies?
I would imagine Hills Have Eyes 1 is probably, after The Last House on the Left, then and now his most visible pre-Nightmare on Elm Street title.
Certainly. I do not think the world was clamoring for a sequel to Deadly Blessing, for instance. But yes, so he went back to that, and how the fuck do you make a sequel to Last House on the Left? Answer, you don't. So Hills Have Eyes it was. He produced it. It was when it was in production. It stopped being in production when there were budgetary issues.
Ran out of money.
Yep, about 2/3 of the way through the movie. And then after Nightmare on Elm Street came out, producers were like, hell yeah, Wes Craven is a bankable director. Let's put out his next movie, but we're not going to actually give him the money to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
So the remaining, I don't think it actually takes up 1/3 of the runtime, but the third of the script that was not shot is substituted with copious flashback footage to the original movie.
Yeah, it's for sure not 1/3 of the length. It's too long. But it honestly might only be around like 10 minutes or 12 minutes. It's certainly not 30 minutes of the film.
Yeah,
flashback.
Exactly.
We're not talking Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
No. Which that movie is kind of the opposite. Is that they wanted a flashback movie, and then the director was like, "What if I added some stuff?" So that it's a totally different misbegotten movie. But yeah, anyway, so Wes Craven was desperate. He said at a later date that he would have directed Lassie versus Godzilla, which frankly I think he should have.
I've heard that. I love that quip. It's very good.
And I wish he'd gotten to make that movie. But anyway, The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. So we open on the grown-up Bobby Carter, one of our legacy characters, because this is, after all, a legacy sequel. One of the earlier versions of what that would turn out to be. He's played again by Robert Houston. He is traumatized. Oh, it's a legacy sequel about trauma, Tim. This is so ahead of its time.
Wes Craven just keeps on inventing new ways for the horror movie to proceed forward.
He really has. The only thing that's missing is that this movie is not just called The Hills Have Eyes. But anyway, yes, Robert Houston returns. Bobby is pretty fucked up about it. He has the world's worst psychiatrist that he talks to.
Yep.
And I assume that, look, I did not rewatch The Hills Have Eyes before this. That's a movie that I actually don't like very much.
Oh, we have had that conversation because it always throws me because it's like my second favorite Craven film. But yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's certainly the second best of his pre-Elm Street movies. But I just don't have a lot of patience for it.
That's fair.
So I don't have a strong memory of if Bobby was like an engineering student or like something that would have allowed him to invent a new type of gasoline, which he has in part 2. But anyway,
I haven't seen it in a while. My recollection is that he's like not anything. He's just a person to add tension as to how many people are going to die.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And he was like college age, though. He's in the flashbacks. He's wearing a college shirt, so I think that was part of it. But maybe we never learn what his vocation was. But anyway, so yes, he's invented a new form of gasoline. There's a group of teenagers that he's working / palling around with who do dirt biking, and they're going to this race to kind of debut this new kind of nitro gas and make a lot of money.
On the subject of legacy sequels, it is the plot of Cars 2.
Yeah, there's less espionage, but yeah, definitely the setup.
But yes, so very exciting, very compelling way to get the story revved up, as it were, talking about experimental fuel, very much planting seeds that the film will later not even contemplate harvesting, I don't think, really.
Yeah, I want to say that probably just got lost in we did not finish this movie, but it's hard to say what would have happened in the third act if it had been completed as written.
I will say one thing that I have to assume would have happened in the missing third of the script. Bobby does not persist in the film beyond inventing this fuel.
No, he doesn't, and it is a shocking thing, and I very much I agree. And there are other things that kind of vanish that I will point to that I think were probably in the original script.
Like it absolutely has got to be the case that he had more to do. I just refuse to even contemplate that he didn't.
Yeah, and look, Robert Houston was not busy.
Yeah, he was not the get. He was not expensive. It was not we can afford Robert Houston for a day. Like, that's not what's going on here.
Yeah, no, it just he got lost in the sauce, lost in the shuffle. But anyway, so there's a bunch of teenagers. The only ones who, well, matter is a strong word. 'Cause does Roy matter?
I mean,
But there's a handsome one named Roy. He's spirited. I don't know. I can't even think of a second adjective for this character. But
is he the one who like does the dirt biking?
Yeah, we see him dirt biking. He gets knocked out from his dirt bike at a certain point.
But like, I guess that would be my question. Is it like, do they all go dirt biking, or is it like the entourage around a superstar dirt biker?
No, they dirt bike as a group. I think we see all the boys dirt biking and none of the girls.
You might be right. I think you might be right.
Yeah, because we definitely see. I think Harry and Hulk dirt biking, and they really don't matter, except that Harry is annoying and thankfully dies very quickly.
Yes.
But yes, Roy is handsome. He is played by Kevin Spertus, or also known as Kevin Blair. He's a soap actor, but he did star as the hunky hunk in Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood.
I don't think I picked up on that.
Yeah. He's the one that Lar Park Lincoln has the hots for in that movie.
I have great news for you.
What?
He is an out gay actor.
Yes. Oh, don't pretend I don't already know this.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, our listeners perhaps did not.
Yes. No. I'm glad. The listenership does need to know. He's hot and he's gay. Love it when that happens. But his character Roy is not gay. He's dating a woman. Her name is Cass. She's played by Tamara Stafford, and I think. Okay, so. Just to blip ahead a tiny bit. This is the most straightforward, non-supernatural 80s slasher that Wes Craven was ever in charge of.
Agreed.
And I think it speaks to where Wes Craven's interests lie, that the final girl character is a blind psychic who is clearly named after Cassandra.
Yes, indeed. I like that you took it that way, because where I was going to go is that I feel in all of the annals of 80s slasher where the final girl gets an extra personality trait so we can keep track of her and we know she's the one we need to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. I don't think any slasher movie other than this one was so completely flat-footed in doing that as to make the personality trait she's blind.
Yeah, the only other one I can think of is it's more diffuse because there's two final girls. It's Lauren Hughes from The Love Boat and Jennifer Jason Leigh in Eyes of a Stranger. But Jennifer Jason Leigh is, I believe, both blind and deaf in that movie. Well,
there you go. So she's got two quote-unquote personality traits.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it is this flashing neon sign above her that she will survive this movie.
Oh, yeah. And no, as you say, a film that is based on a very gritty, non-paranormal cannibal movie, making its protagonist a psychic blind lady is real special.
It's really special, and this is one of the reasons that I appreciate it. Just as a longtime Wes Craven lover and apologist, depending on what movie we're talking about. I think it's one of the more charming things about the movie, because even in his just rank rat piss awful movies, there's something that I feel like is born earnestly and genuinely from the things that he's interested in at the time.
Sure.
Like My Soul to Take, which I think is just a top to bottom terrible movie. It's kind of a love letter to bird watching, which he got into in his later years.
See, I didn't know that, and that might be what pushes me to see My Soul to Take.
Ooh. Maybe it should. It is garbage. I hate that movie, but I appreciate that he got to work his passions into it.
Okay.
And I'm glad it did not turn out to be his last movie, because Scream 4 is no one's best movie, but it is certainly a better way to end a career than My Soul to Take.
Sure.
Anyway, yes, so we've got Cass the blind psychic. We've got a bunch of dead meat teenagers who are bikers and or their girlfriends. But their chaperone is the other legacy character, the daughter of the cannibal clan from the original movie, formerly known as Ruby, now known as Rachel, played by Janice Blythe. She is here. She's trying to live a normal life, but she's the one who, when they run out of gas, right?
Yes, they run out of gas.
Yeah, they run out of gas. Oh, yeah, because they have that conversation about, well, we're carrying a bunch of gas. Can't we put it in the bus? And it's like, no, it would explode.
Yes.
Wink.
Oh, that is how it seeds the... Okay.
Yeah, it's another seeded thing that happens.
That pays off.
It pays off, but not in the way that they talk about.
That's fair.
I think there just would have been some sinew between those two moments that did not get filmed.
Sure.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, they break down while taking a shortcut through the Nevada desert because.
Well, first we need to pin down the trip to the dirt bike competition is going to go through exactly the part of the desert where the Carter family got ambushed by cannibals many years ago.
Wouldn't you know it?
So Bobby's like, "Fuck this, I'm not going."
Oh, and yeah, instead, I forgot to mention that. Yes, that's what happens.
And so that's why he just blinks out of the movie. And instead, Rachel, who used to be Ruby, who used to be of the cannibal family, for reasons that I think the script has just not even started to try to make sense, decides to go instead.
Yeah, no, I think that she and Bobby are in business together, so the idea was that both of them were going to go. But the way that she leads these young people to their doom.
But like why is she not also unwilling to go to the desert? That's my question. Like, it's a plot point. It is the first plot point in this movie, which is amazing because it doesn't pay off at all. For like 8 minutes, is Bobby going to go or not? He doesn't. And she's just like, sure, I'll go. Even though in theory she would have the same bucket o' trauma around this place, if not a greater one.
Yeah, no, you'd think, but she also is, I guess, more familiar with the territory because she grew up there. I don't know. I'm unclear on why any of this would happen. But anyway, so we get them into the desert. The bus breaks down. They do take a shortcut because they realize they think they have an extra hour, but then they realize that daylight savings happened and no one changed their clocks.
Loved that happened this week.
Yes.
As we are recording this episode, dear listeners, it's been like 3 days since the time change. The other time change. We had the time change where we gained an hour. They had the time change where they lost an hour. But it was still like, oh, it was timely.
Yeah, it's very timely. And honestly, no one told me that daylight savings was ending this week. I missed it. I am trawling news websites all day for work. No one informed me. So I mean, I woke up an hour earlier than normal, and I was like, I mean, that happens. And I was like, oh, the sun's a little brighter today. But it wasn't until like actual breakfast time several hours later that I looked at the clock and was like, well, that's not right. And I just really felt gaslit by the world. So yes, I would have ended up stranded in the Nevada desert with these people. And of course we do have the remainder of the cannibal family, which is not much. It's Michael Berryman returning as Pluto in a very brief appearance that could have been briefer, frankly. He's not doing a great job in this movie.
No, I feel like he has more to say than he did in the first film, and I feel like that is a mistake.
Yes, I think that's what it is. It just feels hollow and weird.
He also just looks worse, and we can tell he looks worse because we see flashback footage, and like they spent more money on the makeup in the 1977 film, I guess.
Which is wild because they didn't have any.
He looks real latexy.
Yeah, he just looks red.
Yes.
It's very bizarre. But anyway, most of the cannibal clan was killed, and I think including Pluto in the original movie. But they brought him back. You know, they retconned that. And then there is a new uncle in town who is kind of replaced the original Papa Jupiter. He's known as the Reaper. He's played by John Bloom, and he is there sometimes.
He is a villain from Mad Max 2.
Oh my goodness, he really is.
On the subject of movies that came out several years before this one that Wes Craven was just taking from without apology, he decided to make this a Mad Max movie for no reason, and I kind of love it.
Yeah, no, see, that's the thing. Even though this is clearly a lazy work for hire kind of spit out of the back of the industry kind of movie, there's little glimmers of at least he's stealing from interesting places. But yeah, so that's it. We've got a group of stranded teenagers and Ruby. We've got 2 members of a cannibal family, and they're at a compound that the cannibal family lives in, and they're kind of running around, dirt biking, fighting, setting booby traps. Who will live? Surprise, it's cast.
You forgot to mention one of the most important members of this cast, though.
Okay, tell me.
not one of the recurring actors, but one of the recurring characters from the last movie.
Oh, of course.
They get Beast.
Yes, the dog Beast has
Beast the dog.
Because this is so in the original there were two dogs. They were named Beauty and Beast.
And do you get the symbolism? Beauty gets killed, so Beast has to fight the cannibals.
Yeah, no, Beauty is dead in The Hills Have Eyes.
Do you get it?
Look, The Hills Have Eyes is not a subtle film.
It couldn't afford to be subtle.
Yeah, I think that's to its advantage. I mean, those 70s movies of his are just so grindhouse, like gritty, grotesque. And like Hills Have Eyes does that 70s thing where it ends the second the conflict is over.
Mm-hmm.
It's so pared down. But anyway, this movie is not. It's very busy, but also doesn't have enough cannibals in it.
Well, because it's a slasher movie. The previous one is a siege movie. It is two families facing off against each other, winnowing each other's numbers down. This one is, we went to Crystal Lake and Jason attacked us, but here Crystal Lake is a desert compound and Jason is a Mad Max 2 extra.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's mildly, interesting is a strong word, but Craven never did anything this close to a proper slasher. He made many slashers, but he made Supernatural with Elm Street, and he made Postmodern with Scream. And this is the most like distilled version of what was going on in the early 80s that he could do. And I don't think it works, and I think it's fine that he went a different direction.
Indeed. I will say, to the point that it's mostly just taking the path of least resistance, and he's clearly not interested in making it. But I do like, so, every slasher has their thing, they have their machete or they have their, pitchfork or they have whatever they have. The Reaper and the kids, trying to get back at the Reaper have like traps. And traps is a good gimmick for a slasher movie.
Yes, traps is a very good gimmick, and it's one of Wes Craven's favorite things. He loves a booby trap. Like that's how Nancy's trying to kill Freddy at the end of Elm Street. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of booby traps in the original Hills Have Eyes as well, but he just really ups the ante on the traps. And quite a few of them are pretty fun to watch play out.
And I will say, since you mentioned that, there's a lot about this film. Maybe not a lot, but there's some about this film that feels like he was just doing this to get through this project, but like it was triggering something where he was thinking what he could do, and then those things turned into Nightmare on Elm Street. Because even though Nightmare on Elm Street comes out first, this movie was written and mostly in production first. But like the traps is one thing, the going back to a kind of slasher structure, which he hadn't really done ever by this point, I'm not sure.
Deadly Blessing is slasher-esque.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think also, as awful as the flashbacks are, and it's just like chaotically shoved into the film, I feel like there's some flicker of getting to the dream sequences in Nightmare on Elm Street by thinking about how to work those kind of like subjective breakaways from the plot into a movie.
Yeah,
and
no,
again, I don't want to call Nightmare the better version of this film, but I feel like there's stuff that he's working out here that he just then got right in his next film.
Yeah, and a lot of it is pet themes of his that kind of cropped up again and again, and this was just one last chance to chew on them.
Yes.
Like there is a great dream sequence in Deadly Blessing where a big spider falls into Sharon Stone's mouth. And there's also it's memorable. I think it's on the poster, or at least a version of the poster.
Okay.
And there's also a dream sequence in The Last House on the Left where I don't remember who's having the dream, but it involves someone's teeth being knocked out with a
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
gross. I mean, you don't see it, but it's hard to look at. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so yeah, this is just like one more chance for him to like really massage those ideas before doing something actually good with them. But anyway, so this was your did I hear correctly that this was your first time watch of The Hills Have Eyes?
This was my first time watch. It's been something I've been thinking about for a long time. I first saw The Hills Have Eyes 1. Oh man. Probably 15 or 18 years ago. Very long time ago I first saw The Hills Have Eyes. Loved it. But I was already savvy enough to understand sequels are usually bad. This particular sequel had such a bad reputation that I've always been very curious and very nervous about it because it felt like it was going to be just a really frustrating, disastrous watch that would not in any way appreciate or increase my appreciation for the first film. And I was right. This is just junk. This is a bad movie. But so I am glad to have finally checked it off because there always has been that big curiosity, not in the sense of like maybe it's actually good, but what the hell could it possibly be? It's of all the Craven films I had not seen, it is the one I was most curious about seeing.
Well, I'm glad the voters in the poll afforded you the opportunity to do so at the very least, if nothing else. What had you heard about the movie beforehand? Did you know of any specifics, or were you just totally in the dark as to what it was going to be?
I knew quite a bit. I knew that Ruby was back. I knew that Bobby was back. I knew that the dog was back. I knew that the dog had a flashback, which we need to talk about at some point. I'd heard a bit.
Got it.
Quite a bit.
Hadn't
heard it was about dirt biking. That was news.
Okay, that's probably fun news. You're like, all right, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, let's talk about the flashbacks and the dog flashback because they peter out after the first act, and it's just a way to get it up to feature length. But I think I will have the opening remarks. I think that they are handled more elegantly than any of the like early Friday the 13th movie flashbacks where they just dump a bunch of footage at the beginning of the movie. And I think it's less intrusive than the movie we already talked about, which is Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. But how did you feel about them?
Well, I mean, obviously, if our point of comparison is Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, then certainly every movie is going to look like a masterpiece next to that. I don't know if I'd use the word elegant. I think it's trying to be more creative and more story-oriented than Friday the 13th, where if you're lucky, you get a kind of interesting impressionistic montage, and if you're not, you just get a couple scenes from the last movie, just kind of glued right in there at the start, which is absolutely the laziest way to use your flashback exposition. So it's certainly more creative than that. I still think it's pretty bad. Like, I still think the motivation that they were there to increase the running time is always really obvious to me.
Yeah.
I think that's they don't feel like they should have been coming up. They're always too long. Like they need to give us a little bit of information, and instead they give us like a big old chunk of information. Mm-hmm. And it's not even information. It's just like, hey, remember there were cannibals? Let's look at the cannibals for a minute and a half.
Yeah, it's not information that is necessary.
They're not target. Well, it can't be because it wasn't written that way, right? Mm-hmm. And it feels like that. And it also just, I frankly think, doesn't help anything about this movie that we get so much footage from the very well done first movie. Like I said, I mean, Michael Berryman looks like shit in the new movie, and we can tell because he looks pretty good in the footage that we see him in from the old movie. And that's just not a comparison that's helpful.
No, that's a very good point. But yeah, I guess just for me, I've been kind of inoculated against the idea of flashbacks of this movie's flashbacks because they're just better than worse things that I've seen.
That's fair,
but that's not totally reasonable.
And I will say the dog flashback is mad genius. Like it's awful, but it's the only part of this movie that is so bad it's good.
Yes, absolutely. It's certainly the kind of catalyst. It's the one thing anyone wants to talk about in The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, and usually they will point to it as if it's a bad thing, but I find it delightful. I find it to be a selling point. A dog has a flashback. Like it's a good time. I
think if anything, the worst thing about it is that it promises, like, since that is what people talk about, I feel like it promises a much wackier movie. Because that is the solitary wacky thing that happens.
Yeah, no, so it's just really not a fun movie.
Yeah, really. And like if what you hear about it is this is the movie with the dog flashback, you're going to be expecting just some sort of crazy like I don't know, fucking Mandy or something. You're not going to be expecting a really grungy, cheap slasher that happens to have a dog flashback in it. Insofar as people talk about the dog flashback first and only, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, so that's the flashback stuff. I don't even know where to start with the rest of this movie. Was there like a prevailing impression upon you? Obviously you did not like it, but is there a thing you disliked the most?
Wow. It is tough to start, isn't it? I mean, as much as I think it's cool that Wes Craven is also a fan of Mad Max, because how could he not be, given who he is and given where the culture was at that moment in time? I think The Reaper sucks. I think The Reaper is just a complete mortifying trade down of a villain from the clan in the first movie, including the repeated Pluto. Like just everyone is better. He's a kind of weird, goofy cartoon character, and I just don't think it fits anything that the film is trying to do.
No, and he never kind of coalesces into anything, let alone a credible threat. He's just kind of this, not even hulking enough, but he's just this kind of big guy, just kind of roaring in the background sometimes. Mm-hmm. He's just kind of sitting there, not really doing anything. And it's hard to feel happy about them triumphing over this random guy.
Exactly. And it's, I guess that would probably be one of my biggest problems, is that the film simply does not have a credible sense of danger, which, I mean, does every slasher film? God, certainly not. But I think the best slasher films certainly have some feeling of brutality right around the corner, and I just don't think this does. Which is especially... Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, which is an especially disappointing trade down, because part of what works for me so well about the first movie is it is such a vicious film. Like, it is one of the nastiest movies made in the United States in that era, I think. And this one is just not that... Again, it's just not that dangerous.
No, it's not. It's toothless in a lot of ways, and it would have been from the script that it has anyway. Like, it's clearly that's just not on its mind. Which is a bummer. And for me, I think the things that I don't like about this movie are numerous but more scattershot. Like, I don't think there's a central thing. But one thing I do want to point to is and this man has been shit upon a lot, and sometimes rightly, but the score by Harry Manfredini here is absolutely useless. I think his score for Friday the 13th is pretty great. It steals from the right places, and his that sonic kind of flash of genius that he had with the like shh, 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 shh.
Exactly.
That's his magnum opus, and that's the one time I feel like he ever tried.
Yeah.
For the rest of his career, he's recycled Friday the 13th, and that was already recycling Jaws and Psycho.
Yeah.
And this is... I don't think Craven and Manfredini worked again after this. They might have. I might be misremembering, but they worked together on Swamp Thing and then this. And the score is almost identical, and identically does not fit the location and the vibe of the movie at all.
No, it's just so completely generic and has absolutely no connection to the on-screen action in even the sort of like punctuating way, right? Like, as easy it is to feel bad about jump scares, right, where we see the villain and then like the violence goes Shra! Like, we don't even get that really in this score, and it's like how mindless does the score have to be that it doesn't even give you like acceleration in the moments when the killer is chasing the good guys.
Yeah, it's such a bummer, and I can't say I expected very much from Harry Manfredini, but I know he can do, if not more, than at least anything.
He can do something. Yeah,
like the score that he did for Slaughter High is different. It's not good, but it's different.
Sure. This really does just feel like the outtakes from Friday the 13th kind of were being used as temp music, and that was that.
Absolutely. I mean, and maybe it was because, like,
Who's to say?
again, just misbegotten from top to bottom. This movie. And yeah, what else? I mean, there's a very uncomfortable joke where so there's a black character and he has a black girlfriend, as does happen from time to time in these movies, including Friday 7. But there's this weird line that I think is supposed to be charming where one of the white friends walks up to the black friend and is like, "Hey, have you been to the beach? You've got a great tan. Get it? You're black." And I was just like, what on earth is going on here? It's just not right. And it feels, I mean, maybe that's what people were saying in the 80s and black people just had to deal with it. And I'm sure they were saying similar enough things, but it's too reminiscent of, I think Wes Craven has a similar issue that Stephen King does, which is when they write like contemporary dialogue, it can get really goofy really quickly. And this is like the pissing lemonade of, or like making lemonade in your pants. Is that what it was from Silver Bullet?
Yeah, that was right.
But yeah, it's just got that same vibe.
It doesn't, because like I think when Stephen King does it, it at least has the decency to feel like aliens are trying to pantomime humanity. Craven just feels like he's so desperate that he has that one black friend to prove he's not racist.
Yeah.
Like, it's that kind of vibe to me. Like, yeah. It's a bad version of humanity, not a non-humanity.
Yeah, very fair. I don't know. What else?
I mean, like, I think there's a lot of stuff that's not sporting. Like, the cast is generally terrible and the characters are bad, but it's a slasher from 1983. I mean, what are we expecting, really?
Yeah, it's pretty par for the course.
Pretty par for the course. I mean, I do think Tamara Stafford, who plays Cass, is being asked to do different stuff, and sometimes she does it, and sometimes the movie forgets that the character's blind, and you know that's amusing of it, given that she has no other characteristics. But you know, in the scenes where they're foregrounding it, I think that she's at least trying to carry something about like the physicality that would involve. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that there are parts of the third act kind of final girl sequence that do work. I like the way that she is kind of forced to use all of her senses to try and get out of danger. I really like the inexplicable, like, cherry red pit of torture hell that she has to descend into.
Yes. That's good.
Yeah, that's a very good grace note to a movie that doesn't have any grace, really.
No, I will say that also, because we both kind of, I think, touched on the traps as being maybe a better thing about this film than not. I think it has the very good decency to end on its best sequence. Like, their trap to get rid of the Reaper works enough. It's not great. Like, in many movies, it would be one of the weaker scenes. But in this movie, I think it's, like, for sure the best trap to me.
Yeah, like the ring of fire and then luring him into the bus.
The ring of fire and, like, dropping a rock to pull... Roy, thank you. Really, really fast through the fire. Like that works.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're right. And there are some other fun things like Hulk, who's a character who I couldn't tell you a single thing about. He gets speared the fuck off of his bike at one point.
That's the thing I could tell you about Hulk, and I liked that.
Yeah,
it was a solid Friday the 13th style kill.
Yeah, and the black girlfriend, who I'm sure has a name in the credits, but I for the life of me couldn't catch it in the movie. She has a throat slash that's halfway decent. And there's one part where a character gets dragged under a bus. I think it's her boyfriend.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and that's kind of a reversal of a thing that happened earlier, was when someone was trying to fix the bus and was done with his attempt and gets dragged out from under the bus. So there's a little bit going on here, but the kills are fine. They're not very well executed in terms of gore. It's not a very gory movie at all. And they're not creative enough, but some of them are fun.
Yeah, and I mean, like, also, this came out and was sort of made, like that 1983 through 1985 window there, This is a period in time when people are cracking down on good gore, so I'm not shocked it doesn't really have a ton. Like, again, there are some things that are just like the nature of a mid-'80s slasher film that aren't fair to hold it against. I think it has enough that is its own unique problems that just saying, well, it didn't have enough gore. Well, no film from 1985 did.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Do you have any more of those unique problems you would like to point us to?
I mean, I don't know. It's just such a bummer to talk about. It's, one of the things that I really liked about the first movie was how just beautifully it used the hills that have eyes. Great shot in the American Southwest kind of movie. This one's just not. I mean, I don't think it's hideous. I don't think it's like ugly to look at, but it has very little sense of kind of the desert as this oppressive force. It's just kind of the place where they go. Again, it's like the only difference between this movie and abandoned cabins at Crystal Lake is that it's yellow instead of green.
Yeah, no, I you're totally right. And because there are so many interiors for the characters to be in this movie. There's a lot of wandering around a creepy cabin rather than we are in this camper van and we are trapped in the middle of nowhere. It definitely loses that. You're totally right.
And I think it's clearly the case the person making this film didn't want to make it, and he latched onto like the easiest slasher stuff to just kind of puff out the film so he didn't have to think about it. And that's fine. Like, that's his right as a film director. But if you feel it, I think you really feel it when you're watching it.
Yeah, you do. Like, certainly the things about it that are more interesting don't really have anything to do with that. Oh, shoot. What else was I going to say? Oh, and just in terms of just to follow up on the things that it forgets about, we talked about Bobby never coming back, and the bus maybe being set up to be a booby trap in a different way. But also the character Ruby/Rachel, she gets knocked out on a rock about 20-25 minutes before the end of the movie, and the movie completely forgets about her.
100%.
And that, if you were, you can't make more footage, I understand that, but you put a still frame of her at the end, like at the end of Animal House, and just be like, here's what happened to Ruby. It just doesn't feel right.
And I think in general, just like nothing really pays off her being a member of the mutant cannibal family. Like, it doesn't matter really. Like, she's not smarter than the rest of them, so she can outthink Pluto or anything like that.
Yeah, and she doesn't have any advice to share with them of like how to survive in the desert or how to deal with these people.
Exactly.
She's just also there until she very much isn't.
Exactly. It's just it's just a flat, lazy movie. I mean, it has some terrible choices, but I think the worst stuff about it is really that it just doesn't care. It has no inspiration. And I don't want to say it has around the edges it has inspiration. The core of it has no inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very plain that it is a mercenary movie, and I don't know that effort even worked. I don't know that it made any money to speak of.
I really don't think it did. I think it just kind of got like meekly dropped into a handful of theaters to legitimize it, and then basically turned out to be like a cable play.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing that right here. Brief limited theatrical run before a direct-to-video and pay television release.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it is survived. I have a very nice Blu-ray that I believe Arrow put out of The Hills Have Eyes Part 2.
That is correct. That tracks.
Yeah, very much. And it has a loving essay at the beginning that I read through and was baffled by. But, you got to get someone to write about it.
Yep. And I mean, it will never completely vanish because Wes Craven's career, I think people will seek the films out, especially because it is a sequel to one of his bigger films. So I think,
yeah.
So here's my question for you, because you have seen every Wes Craven film, correct?
I've seen every theatrically released Wes Craven film. I have not seen any of his 4 TV movies, but I've kind of held out on those so I can still have a little bit to watch in dribs and drabs throughout my life.
That is fair. Would you call this his worst film?
Oh, that is a great question. I believe I have an official ranking, and let me see what I have at the bottom there. I don't know that I would, because actually, already come to think of it, My Soul to Take is worse than this.
Okay.
Okay, on my current ranking, or on my ranking that I wrote more than half a decade ago, I have it as the third worst behind My Soul to Take and then Cursed. But I actually think I would put Cursed higher than this movie with my modern eyes.
Okay.
But no, it's certainly one of his worst.
I have seen neither. That's the thing. I haven't seen really any of the like canonically awful Wes Craven films till now. So
So wait, so I'm curious, what have you not seen of him that feels more like a blind spot, on that curve?
So the blind spot is definitely The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Ooh, I really like that movie. I think that's not one of like the bad ones.
No. I just mean like in terms of the Wes Craven films I haven't seen. That's the one that's like the embarrassing one. The other ones that I haven't seen, and again, this is theatrical only. I'll follow your lead there. I haven't seen Deadly Friend. I haven't seen Cursed, and I haven't seen My Soul to Take.
Got it. Yeah, I think you're not missing much with Deadly Friend. My Soul to Take, I think, is fascinatingly awful in a unique way.
Okay.
And Cursed it's another movie like The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, where it was just so fucked with. Because that was, Wes Craven reuniting with Kevin Williamson, which is the thing that you wouldn't want. But it was supposed to be like, what if Scream was a werewolf movie? And it became very much, it got that Dimension Miramax treatment of just they nuclear bombed that movie.
Right. I remember that happening. Like, that was what people were talking about when the movie came out.
Yeah.
Was that it was not the film that it was supposed to be, that Craven and Williamson had a very different approach than what ended up being the thing that got released to theaters. So
yeah, very, very much that. I think it works as a movie much better than The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 in my memory of it. Obviously, on this ranking that I have, I don't know that I agreed. But I would rewatch Cursed much more readily than rewatch Hills Have Eyes Part 2, I would say. And
yet here we are.
I didn't vote for it.
You put it on the list.
I did, but the other options were worse.
Fair enough.
My long list was rough. Like, were we going to watch The Birds 2 Land's End, Tim?
I mean, we could have.
We could have. I mean, I've seen it. Have you seen that?
I actually have not.
Okay.
I believe I started it and didn't finish it.
Yeah, that's about right. Not Rick Rosenthal's finest moment, and he didn't have the most fine of moments.
No, indeed.
Anyway, I think we're done talking about The Hills Have Eyes Part 2.
I'm okay with that.
Sounds good. And in that case, so keep an ear out, everybody. We're going to hit you back up with another type of podcast in a couple weeks before the end of November, hopefully. I shouldn't have said anything. You will hear from us again.
We're committed to it now.
Uh-oh. But for our next Bride episode, which will be the one Bride episode in December, we're kind of killing two birds with one stone, because we're at the end of a quarter, as we're trying to work out our new system, and I'm also trying to complete some Patreon fulfillments that are as we relaunch the Patreon and the podcast and everything. So we will be talking about, as requested by Gavin McDowell, the 1989 Brian Yuzna movie Society, which I have never seen and know that I desperately need to see. So I'm very excited.
I am a big fan.
Yeah,
I'll say.
I know a little bit about what's going on there, but the Brian Yuzna that I've seen, I really dig. I like the cut of his jib. So I'm excited to see one of the movies of his that's like kind of, if there is a canon of Brian Yuzna classics, this is on it.
For sure.
But yeah, so we'll catch you in December on the Bride of Alternate Ending podcast for that. And until then, I guess have a good Thanksgiving or whatever. If you celebrate a late November thing wherever you live, have a good one. Bye-bye.